Our guest is Bridget Mcnulty, and she is joining us from South Africa. Bridget is the author of the internationally published book, The Grief Handbook, a guide through the worst days of your life. She's also co-founder of Sweet Life, South Africa's largest online diabetes community. Welcome, Bridget.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, good to have you. So why did you write the Grief Handbook?
My mom died very suddenly in 2019. She was perfectly healthy, and then all of a sudden she was diagnosed with 4 different kinds of cancer. And between diagnosis and the day she died was only 13 days. So it was very sudden and traumatic. And in the wake of her death, I turned to books because I'm a writer and a reader. And I tried to find a book that would help. I was looking for a kind, empathetic guide through what felt like the worst days of my life, something to kind of hold out a hand and show me how to do grief a little bit better. And I couldn't find it. So I wrote it, and it's now the Grief Handbook, a guide through the worst days of your life.
Excellent. Well, this is something they don't teach us in school, right? This isn't like,
No.
okay, we're going to do biology class or chemistry, and we're going to, your next course is grief. We just don't teach it. It's not talked about. So it's great that you did this. And the fact that it wasn't out there is really interesting, and now it is. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. I'd like to ask you a follow-up. When you had this experience with your mom, did you have anticipatory grief where, when she had the diagnosis, and then also, of course, grief when she passed? Did you also experience a form of grief when you had the diagnosis at the beginning?
So I think for us, it was maybe a little different in that the time frames were so condensed.
Okay.
And we found out from the doctor that it was 4 different types of cancer. We saw the oncologist the next day. We said to him, "Is there any hope?" He said no. And we were actually so lucky that he said no, because I think sometimes when you're given hope and like 50% chance that maybe chemo might work, that can make things complex in a whole different way. And I think that if the diagnosis had given her more time, we probably would have felt more anticipatory grief, whereas our experience was all over in 2 weeks.
Did you ever move beyond grief? Does somebody ever stop grieving, or is it a continuing process of ups and downs that really, you never leave or you never let go of?
So what I find interesting about grief is that it's cyclical, which is very different to other aspects of life, right? Usually you have a challenge and you figure out ways to deal with it, and then it gets better or it goes away, or you move on. And I don't think you move on from grief, but I do think you learn to live with it. So for me, I'm not that kind of desperately sad and unable to function now like I was in the beginning. And there are so many aspects of living with the loss of my mom that I'm used to now. So it kind of doesn't shock me as much as it used to. But it's still definitely a part of my day. I wouldn't say I've moved beyond it.
And when you go through the cycles, if you will, where maybe it's a stronger feeling, or it is more, it occupies your thoughts and you're more aware of it, is there anything you do in particular to better cope, or kind of, where you kind of dial up your response or your coping mechanisms when that happens?
What's interesting is, for me, it's actually the opposite. Is you have to just kind of surrender to it and recognize that it's not possible to be good at grief. There are no rules. It takes as long as it takes. It's like a wave that washes over you and then it does pass, but there's nothing you can do to get better at it, which I found very frustrating. It's not a skill. It's more an endurance.
Well, then your strategy is acceptance.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Very hard.
All right, and then kind of right in the same point is, how does control play into this? It's sounding like maybe just to a large degree you don't have control, or are there certain elements or times when you can exert control in a certain way?
There's no control, and I think that's the hardest. And that's what I was looking for in a book, actually, was someone to tell me how to grieve well so that I could tick off all the points and do it. And there is no way to grieve well. We all do it differently. There's no right or wrong. Whatever you're feeling is exactly what you should be feeling.
Right. Scheduling the time where you're going to say, okay, I'm going to grieve between 4 and 5 o'clock, and that's the only time. That's kind of like trying to schedule chaos.
Yeah. Doesn't work.
Okay. Doesn't work. Well, on the brighter side, let's talk about creating moments of happiness. You take time to reflect on the person you're grieving for and the good times. I've heard you talk about this as slices of joy. What does that entail?
I love this idea so much. It's not my idea. I stole it from Google's former happiness guru, Chade Maintain. And he said that instead of striving for some future happiness, we should look in our day for 3-second slices of joy. And they can be as simple as a sip of water when you're feeling thirsty, or lying down in bed after a long day, or a hug from someone that you love, or laughing at a silly meme or joke. There are these little moments scattered throughout our days. And I found, particularly when I was grieving, but even now, that it's such a reassuring way of looking at life, because you're not striving for some future ideal. You're just looking for those little slices of joy in every day.
I love that, because, like it's been said many times, life is lived in moments. And of course, the present moment is what we're talking about. Do you find yourself being drawn also to kind of reliving or thinking about, the good times with your mom, and or for anybody else that's grieving, the good times they had with that person, that's a way of, kind of trying to balance out some of the other more grief-stricken or sadder moments?
I found, particularly the first year after she died, it was really difficult not to think, oh, this time last year we were doing this time last year we were doing this, but it felt quite bittersweet. Whereas now what I do is, instead I try to kind of fold her presence into our daily life. So I talk about her in the present tense a lot to my kids. Good. I'll say like, oh, this is Nanny's favorite, or let's bake Nanny's recipe. I reference her a lot, and I think that helps. It keeps her memory alive. So it's not so much remembering specific things as making her part of the fabric of our everyday.
I love it. I love it. Bridget Mcnulty from South Africa, sharing with us on grief and, of course, the Grief Handbook. Thank you very much, Bridget. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.